Hi everyone, and welcome back to our ECS Ask Me Anything sessions. It's been a few weeks, but we've got a great session lined up for you today, and we're going to be answering your questions on anything to do with AI and machine learning in DevOps. Today, I'm joined by our resident experts, Phil Smith and Babak Takan. And at ECS, we've been working on some exciting projects in this area, which Phil and Babak will expand on throughout the session. But to start off with, I'm going to explain a bit about how this session works. So our experts will be here to answer any questions that you have on the area of AI and machine learning and DevOps. And as the conversation begins and continues, a question might pop into your head. So if you do want to ask a question, then please share the question in the YouTube live comment stream below, and we'll do our best to answer it. We're going to wrap up the session at 12:45, but then after that, the recording will remain on YouTube on this link. So if you do want to rewatch anything to recap, or if you want to share with others, then please feel free to do so. So I'm now going to hand over to Babak and Phil to introduce themselves and tell you a bit about their role within ECS. So Babak, I'll start with you.
Hi, I'm Babak Takan. I'm a senior engineer in ECS Digital. My background is in applied mathematics and computer science. I'm specializing in machine learning, and for the past 3 years, I've been consulting a variety of DevOps projects for our clients, as well as leading the machine learning community in ECS Digital.
Cool, thanks for that. I'm Phil Smith, so I'm the CTO for ECS. I've been with the company about 3 years now. My focus is to bring forth opportunities across our 3 major areas, which are digital transformation, CX, and data. And so, yeah, I'm really excited today to talk about some of the impacts that we've seen and the technologies that are being used in the AI ML space.
That's great. Yeah, no doubt we'll discuss more of these areas as the session goes on. So I'm going to dive right into some of the questions that we've got. So the first question that we want to discuss is, how would you summarize the current use of AI and machine learning in the industry? And Phil, I don't know if you want to start this one off.
Sure, yeah. So obviously the industry that we're working in has a lot of heritage. I think that's the best word to describe it. And therefore, it means they have a lot of techniques and platforms that use AI and ML already. A lot of those use traditional technologies, so data center based. And I think what we're seeing is a large realization across many of the different business areas in these organizations that are now seeking to use AI and ML. And they have a really sort of large area in which they can bring value both to customers and also to employees of organizations. And so we're seeing them be implemented in customer-facing technologies. So if you think about, journeys for customers coming into an organization, wanting help, for example, how to disseminate what the intent is from a customer that's asking questions, how to provide answers, to provide self-service. But what we're also seeing is that data being blended in the background. If you think, obviously, a bank has many controls and policies and governance, helping agents who are on the calls or on chats that are helping those customers by providing information to their fingertips from the large sources of data that these organizations keep. And we're also seeing, quite a large amount of effort being put into increasing the velocity with which people can create models that actually respond to the change in the environment. So if you think this year, for example, with the pandemic, the way organizations have operated has changed immensely in a very, very short space of time. And so if you consider a subject like fraud, where ML and AI is used extensively, the actual way behaviors are for fraud have changed immensely in the last sort of 8 months. And so those models have got to keep up. And that means that the underlying processes to create artificial intelligence are changing as well. And I think we'll hear a bit more about that later on.
That's great. Thanks for that. Babak, what about you?
So it's, I think Phil actually pretty much covered most of it. Reality is that AI is still at its infancy, even though the technology has, the term itself was coined in the mid-50s. And what we saw in the 2010s was that the adoption of AI started increasing. And this is with the availability of new tools, with new platforms that's allowed us to leverage these techniques and get more interesting things done. And now this availability of tools has allowed us to bring it into our project, bring it into our work, adopt it constantly. Areas such as cybersecurity has been using it for a long time. They've seen the value of it, the necessity of it, if I may say so. And they've been leveraging that. And now adoption is increasing over time.
Yeah, and I think you both touched on this briefly with the first question, but what are some of the benefits that you've seen of using AI and machine learning in DevOps teams or within organizations?
Well, the tools basically allow us to build more useful systems that are more interactive. And one of the important things are, because it assists decision making, it gives us better handling of information, and to a large extent, if applied correctly, it can relieve the information overloads that we found ourselves in, given the large and the extent of the systems that we are dealing with on a day-to-day basis and the problems that are ever increasing. It's the size of the problems that we're dealing with are getting bigger with technology increasing, the amount of data that is flowing in. It's just these are the essentials of the ways that's transforming and the benefits of it, really.
Yeah, I think it's the amount of data that the world is producing is increasing at a phenomenal rate. I mean, I think that's definitely fact now, but that's a statement that's quite broad in general. If you start to drill down into particular areas, so Babak mentioned, along the financial side, let's say fraud, for example, as I alluded to a minute ago, there's a ton of data there and no one human could assess it. And if you look at what was happening prior to having, the tools that we're using now, people would have had to have assessed each and every individual log to discover whether a payment was fraudulent, for example. And so, the creation of machine learning models around those data sets that now provide augmentation to humans allows us to actually be able to with a better degree of accuracy, find fraud. That's not to say that that's a fixed thing. You've built your model and it'll last you forever. It won't, because fraud will change. But certainly for the period that it is useful, it prevents having to look through each and every log. And it also makes it slightly more preemptive and predictive around how to capture those elements of fraud or those events. And ultimately, at the end of that, then that is protecting customers. It's protecting them from losing their money, but secondarily, it's protecting the revenue for these financial services organizations. And really, that should be the secondary benefit. It should be the customer's protection that drives the creation of great machine learning models, for example. And again, seeing it in areas where sort of for customer services, for example, the plethora of different questions that can be asked on that first point of contact, if taken in individuality, each and every individual event, for example, it would be impossible for humans to look at that and decide clearly which way customers should be sent into a contact center for specialist help, for example. But leveraging that as a data set that you can then build a model on, and having that model begin to return useful decisions can actually expedite the customer getting to that endpoint of where they need to go. Let's say it's a mortgage query or a balance query. They're two different things. It would be a tremendous waste of time and an exceedingly boring job for someone to sit on a telephone and just ask that question, hi, why have you called? So instead, it prevents what we've done actually is to invent, what they call IVRs. So press 1 for mortgages, press 2 for balance. By option 9, everyone's really bored. Like they don't really want to think about. I just wanted option 9, and I've had to listen to 8, and I'm very bored now. So they're already coming into those calls with a negative attitude, and that's where it has helped. I think there's a lot more maturation to go there. There's a lot more we can do.
Absolutely. So one of the things is pretty much like every other emerging technology, we suddenly see potential in addressing problems that we thought in the past may not be able to address. Just by judging the complexity of certain things, we can see that in all aspects. It's not just limited to DevOps. You can see that's what's happening in the car industry, for instance. Besides autonomous cars, which are still in development, we see improvements now with driving assistance, which again, it does things alongside you. It helps you make certain decisions. It improves the way you interact with the world by accumulating all that data, processing it faster than you could, and generally improving your quality of work life, however you want to frame that. Another thing is, another thing is, the largest application, of course, is personal assistance. The stuff that we do now that is automated, and as Phil mentioned with call centers and AVRs, this is something along those lines. We can see the way that people interact with computer systems is changing to a completely new level, where you can get your information out by doing a very simple query that is relevant to you. And it has the intelligence to support this kind of decision making, to understand what information is relevant to you and give you a relevant answer. We see that in search engines as well, because another very commonly used feature of artificial intelligence is within search engines themselves. We're not blindly looking into exact matches, etc. We're looking at history. We're understanding what the queries are. We're understanding what people are trying to search, and we try to present the more relevant results to them, just to limit the search space of what they're looking for.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. There's some real life examples there. So we've had a question come in from Matteo, and they're asking what the difference is between machine learning and deep learning, and whether you can give a practical example of the differences.
Okay, so deep learning is a term that's been coined, and it refers to deep learning neural networks. Neural networks is a way to get machines to essentially map a specific problem to a solution that is done through training and testing through this iterative process. And we eventually get a trained model that allows us to, for a specific input, get the best fitting answer to it. So machine learning itself, all these terms, there's some interplay. So machine learning covers the more traditional methods of getting machines to extract knowledge out of information. That's a key thing, because what we have right now, what's all the data that we're collecting. So whether you want to give an example of pictures on the internet, that's one thing. Information and knowledge are separated. So knowledge is understanding what's in there. Knowledge is giving the understanding that's traditionally what a human would be giving in there. So if I'm asking, what are the pictures that include trees? That's the knowledge to understand that this particular object is containing trees in there. This is not, it's hidden within the information, and that is extracted, and it's understood and comprehended, and it's presented to them. So the difference between machine learning, and it depends who you ask. That's a matter of preference as well, right? So I would say my view is that machine learning, it encompasses, it encapsulates pretty much all the methods that have to do with gaining knowledge out of information, or getting a system to be trained to perform a specific task without it being specifically programmed to do so. And deep learning is a method of doing that. And it's something that emerged recently, and this is through this method of deep neural networks, which it's a very interesting field, and I believe we can elaborate later.
No, that's great. That was well answered. I understand that now. So this is a question probably more for yourself, Phil, given what you've been working on. But how have you seen AI and machine learning work in the customer experience or CX space?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So we've got obviously we're involved with quite a few organizations now on the back of sort of having brought to market our offerings around Amazon Connect. And in and of itself, one of the first warnings to customers is like, this thing produces a lot of data, and they go, "All right," and we go, "No, no, no, a lot of data," and it's every single event and everything is logged. It's a continual streaming set of information about what the customer did, what the customer said, what the agent did, the timings, and so on and so forth. And so there are varying degrees of applications out there for this data. A directly impacting customer one would be on the front end, for example, making those predictions about what customers are actually calling for. And in the very basics of it, you might take it as, hi, I'd like some advice about my mortgage. And that one is actually simple. We're just discerning that the fact that they've said mortgage, and from that, we're able to send them down a particular path towards agents that can help with mortgages. But that really is simple, because offering personalization in that would be that customer calls and we already know they want to talk about a mortgage because we've seen an event in the mortgage account, for example, that maybe they missed a payment, maybe they overpaid, maybe there's something on that account that indicates that at some point it's predictive that they're going to contact us. And so actually, while it's not very easy to do it in the banking world, you cannot pick the phone up and say, "Hi, Steve," in case it's not Steve or Dave or Mike or Jenny or whoever. But the reality there is that you can, once you have identified who it is that's calling you, you can turn around and say, "Hey, we've noticed some odd activity on your current account. We've noticed that you missed a mortgage payment. Is that what you want to speak to us about?" And that is personalization, rather than have the customer tell the flow actually what they want, and then for us to try and discern which is the best way to send them. And actually doing that is kind of an anti-pattern to fixing and transforming customer experience, because if that isn't designed well, you cause what's called failure demand, right? You'll have a lot more people calling back a lot more times, which then uses up a lot more of your agent's time. And it means that you can't focus on the quality of the service and things like fixing the call, fixing the issue first time the customer calls or uses a chat or whichever channel it is. And the other interesting areas, where we're seeing it is agent assistance. So if you can think of the plethora of issues that could be happening across all of the areas within a financial institute, there is no way one agent can know all of that. There just is no way. And actually what you'll find is there's probably siloed information and other things. Mm-hmm. So bringing that all together and building models out that, can detect what the customer's asking about and then be suggesting things to the agent to help with, or particular questions of like, "Oh, I need a form to do so and so," or something like that, instead of it then being a case where the agent doesn't know how to get that information, isn't sure where it is. Actually what happens is that they're using chat bots or small notification windows in their single pane of glass that can start to say, "The customer's asked for this, please click on this link," and it takes the agent to the link, and the agent's more likely then to solve that customer's issue on the first contact, rather than, "I don't really know what to do with this call, I'll pass it to someone else," and then there's zero context and it's frustrating. In areas of compliance as well, so when you're calling a bank, for example, you hear the mandatory things that an agent may have to read to you. By law, I am compelled to do whatever, or by law, I have to ask you this. If those things are not heard within calls, you can prompt the agent. So, it's gone past 1 minute, you haven't said so and so and so and so, you need to do this. And then it can, the warnings can become more urgent. But at the back of that is, a model that is then actually allowing the system to understand what the agent and the customer are doing, comparing that to all of the historic examples, and then suggesting the right actions. So there's a lot of there's a lot more potential to have it in many other areas, but that's where I would say at the moment we're looking to implement the most AI/ML. I guess the other area, just quickly to add, is the services that cloud providers are creating, and they are to avoid the heavy lifting that would have to be done by an organization. So for example, transcribing all of the calls from audio to text. There are service APIs now that you can leverage that will allow you to do that, that which support, almost all the languages, et cetera, so that you can actually turn everything into a transcript. And of course, then if you have it as a transcript, you can do additional analysis on it and form out different machine learning and models. There's comprehend style services, which will then tell you about the sentiment within a call, whether it's positive or negative. And it will give you, structured data out of a conversation, again, that allows you to do additional things. And for example, when that contributes to, say, a business's perspective of how they're doing in their contact centers, they're actually looking at the sentiment of their customers, and they're able to drill down into, well, why have we got a sad face for this particular call? I'll go and listen to it. They listen to it, and then they're able to, add and influence training by adding further services that can then help prompt agents into offering better services and fixing the actual issues that customers are calling about, rather than passing them on through many different agents.
That's really interesting. I always find that a lot of people kind of treat AI and ML as buzzwords essentially, but it's really interesting to hear some specific examples of where they can help out in the CX or customer experience space.
Yeah.
So I'm going to flip this around a little bit. So we've heard a lot about how AI and machine learning can improve your processes, but I believe you've been doing some work, Phil, on how DevOps practices, tools can lend themselves to utilizing and implementing AI and machine learning themselves. I don't know if you would like to expand on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really valid point as well. I alluded to that in the beginning of the call. The types of organizations that we work with, and any organization that's probably 20 years and older, they still have an estate of technology that's, it maybe isn't cloud APIs, it maybe isn't, as automated as it would need to be. And therefore, creating machine learning models out of the data that they have is really difficult for them, for two reasons. One would be that the data that they have is probably not the best, because they're not able to ingest it fast enough due to the fact that they have limitations in their systems. The other is that they're not allowed to, or not enabled to, make the changes to the models in a fast enough way, and that comes down to technology and business process problems around change control, around the systems that they have. If they break a model, is it easy to get back to the previous model, etc., etc. And if you think about when you're dealing with fraud or anything that could have an impact both to the customer and to the bottom line of a bank, there's a lot of control around how those models are produced. And so what we've been working on recently is making it safer to automate the creation of those models. And the reason that it's required so much, if you take that fraud example, around about March, like the world changed. April, May, the way people conducted fraud started to change. And we're not really seeing these as major trends yet that are being spoken about. And they probably will always fit with the umbrella of certain things like, phishing or whatever, right? But the important thing is that the customers that we're working with then weren't able to change their models fast enough. So actually, the model that's live is now not really detecting the types of fraud that are coming through. And so the terminology for ML ops, I think it was already being bandied about, but and to be a little bit crass, it is DevOps for machine learning, but it requires a lot of the same things, right? You require pipelines, you require automated testing, you require the ability to not only influence but transform the change process, so that it still meets the needs of a bank. So it's fully audited, it fits within their change control, but it can be automated to a degree. And then where it needs human intervention, for ensuring, say, there's no data leakage or things like that, those processes can meet and those technologies can meet their change control platforms. And so what we've been able to successfully do, working very much on the AWS platform with products like SageMaker and CodePipeline, are to create pipelines, look very similar to CI/CD pipelines, that can help create those models a lot faster. So that cycle of reassessing the data and applying that to a new version of the model, deploying that model, and then allowing a canary-based or green-blue-based move over to the new version, has really helped organizations to be able to keep up with that pace of change. And so I think what we're going to start seeing, is there'll probably be quite a few products that come out that, they will claim to expedite this process of creating new models. And then there'll be the alternative way, which is like the large organizations. They often, they will buy products, but they are, I think with increasing velocity, they're looking to build for themselves now. They're looking to hire builders to bring their own solutions back in-house rather than have to send their data elsewhere. So they'll start building out and requiring these pipelines and a machine learning operations style mindset to actually begin delivering these models at a faster pace. Working with one organization, they have over 1,000. And if you can think about how much effort that takes in the current and real world, there's no way that they can manage that anymore. They're probably going to have 3,000 or 4,000 within a couple of years, because the application of ML AI is going to increase. They're going to want more solutions. They're going to need teams that are geared around that new operating model to be able to get these things up quick. So really interesting engagement. Talking to a few other organizations about it now. And we'll see what that brings. But there's a desperate need for that same transformation over to a digital mindset to be happening across the roles that are required for machine learning and AI in organizations.
It's really interesting that you mentioned the need to sort of react to different types of fraud given what's going on in the world, because it's quite topical. Because I know that in the Scottish Government briefings, the First Minister's been speaking about how people are sort of scamming people using the Test and Protect system. So no, that's really interesting. I was going to change track slightly and ask Babak a question about AI and testing, and whether AI can help to improve your testing process and how it can do this.
The short answer is yes. Testing is an essential part of what we call DevOps, and this topic that we're discussing right now is essentially the impact of artificial intelligence and DevOps. And there are different parts of DevOps that will be affected in different ways. Specifically in testing, is what we've been seeing in the last few years, maybe 2-3 years, is that there's a variety of tools that are emerging. And these tools are leveraging artificial intelligence in the broader sense in one way or another. And what they're doing, they're filling the gaps of what was inherently manual. So we're talking about things like perhaps self-healing tests, or making it easier to automate your end-to-end testing by recording how users interact with it. We have been experimenting, actually. We've been building a product that we're hoping to soon release into the market. That's its focus is that, we're looking into exploratory testing as a whole. We got together some time back and we discussed what are the aspects of testing that cannot be automated with our conventional tools. What are the gaps over there? What is it exactly? And this is actually an important thing generally when you're approaching a project where you think that AI or ML will be useful to you, when you want to build in some kind of machine intelligence into it, is framing the problems. So identifying what the individual problems is, breaking them down. It is a new technology, so there will be quite a bit of investigation and experimentation associated with it. So, and what we are seeing is that, yes, testing is getting bigger and bigger because our systems are getting bigger. There's more information to process. There's more things to do. We used to rely on SMEs essentially to tell us what an application does or how a system should be tested. And we would depend the quality, the quality of the test will be tied to the proficiency of the tester to what is happening at the given time, whether he understands the system, whether he has, what his abilities are to write a decent test. And of course, all of those things are tied to our own biases as to what we've learned, how we've interacted with the system historically. We find that there is potential, and this is based on a lot of experimentation that has been happening. And we find that, look, there is a way of getting a broader scope, an unbiased scope of what is happening within a system. We can analyze the system, and we can identify the different interactions that a user could potentially have, which is on its own quite novel itself. It's something that, in my experience testing, it's been something that I've been personally looking for a long time. And it accelerates. So it learns your system, it analyzes it, it gives you feedback as to how you could potentially interact with it, and it creates optimal scenarios, for instance, of what you should be testing. How could you provide test scenarios that are giving you full coverage of your system? How can you detect edge cases? Because edge cases are, and this again from experience, it's usually quite lucky to run into one. Sometimes they're intuitive, yes, but what we're trying to do is essentially build something that will provide us this intuition, that will sit next to the developer, next to the tester, and give these insights as to what should be done, what could be done, where the potential faults are. It's changing testing in many ways because there's the different types of tools that we can use. So whether you want to do a visual regression, for instance, there's a different technology that would be applied to it. If you want to do more of a statistical structural analysis on your system, there's a different technology that would be associated with it. There's even at the lower level things that are currently out there, is if it makes it easier to essentially bind your tests to the actions that are being taken. This is part of your traditional test automation. Instead of giving a specific element that you should be looking for, the system or the underlying library has the intelligence to go there and find that element for you. So it would not be tied to specific metadata or some robust logic. The key over here is flexibility. This is what we're looking for. We're looking at things that are more flexible, where we can more creatively or more intuitively assert its behavior overall. So this is one of the things that's can be done. This is something that we've been working on. There are hurdles in the way, and this is mostly we are now we're tied to using conventional technology that has been worked on for many years, by traditional test automation, and we're really pushing that technology to its limits. And what we've seen realistically is that we need a new set of tools. We need the proper vehicle to accommodate this intelligence and allow us to perform to its full potential. Yeah, so that's pretty much my view on it.
Yeah, quite a few things to digest there. I think it'll be really interesting to see the outcome of what you're working on just now. So we've had a question in from Hamad in the YouTube comments asking, and I'll put this out to both of you, whether you think that DevOps is ready for AI methods.
So, well, that's an interesting one. Pretty much as any new technology, you're never ready until you try it, you fail, you iterate over and over, and you get successful results. So the first, if you're prototyping, of course, you're going to start experimenting with things that are not made for purpose. But the more you do it, newer tools will emerge, new technologies will emerge. And we've seen that. We've seen what's been happening in basically cloud providers. So the AI services that are available on cloud providers are incredible. There's things that 10 years ago we could only dream of, and right now you can set up an entire machine learning infrastructure, within a few hours, you can have amazing processing power available to you. And these tools did not exist. They came out of necessity. And this is the way I would suspect it will progress.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting perspective about whether it's ready. I think what governs whether it's ready is whether it's valuable to do so. And so, DevOps has been around long enough for those that have been doing it long enough to be coming to those places where it's like, I've had to redo this a million times. Okay, it's an exaggeration, but you get the point. It's repetitive. You're doing something that's hugely repetitive. I think one of the other areas that maybe requires it, if you take what Babak just said into account, most things are API driven now, and most things create data. Even the things that are the processes to get to the end value item, whether that's a machine learning model or a piece of software. And so, the new cultures that are required for those things to be successfully implemented into an organization around DevOps, for example, around managing change, around, something as simple as pull requests and code reviews, for example, that those become so frequent, the smaller that you get. The likelihood is you either need lots of people doing that, which then becomes a boring, repetitive job because the changes are so small, or you need to augment that with some kind of digital assistant, namely an AI or ML model that can actually highlight the important parts, the bits that you actually need to be making, the most or taking the most attention to. So I would say, directly, yes, we are ready, but it has to be valuable. It has to have a direct correlation with either providing value to your end customer or making the workplace better.
It's to add to that, as we said earlier, best tools actually come out of necessity. This is why security has adopted, why fraud detection has adopted AI for so many years. This is why the most ubiquitous AI at any point is your spam filter. It's quite primitive, yes, but it's still intelligent. It can differentiate to a reasonable extent what is good or not. And this actually came out of necessity, and so will pretty much every other tool.
So yeah, so it's about identifying a problem that needs solved and where AI or machine learning can actually, where these tools can fit into your own processes to help solve those problems. Cool.
Yeah,
Yes,
and I suppose if you take microservices as an example, so obviously, the banks are definitely not structured like Airbnb or Netflix or others like that, but there must be an incredible amount of repetition across all of those different teams that are working almost in their units individually, creating microservices that have, an API and an SLA that goes with it and a set of rules and principles. Is there an opportunity there, for example, to have some level of MLAI that is actually checking, for that repetitiveness? Because, if you could consume underlying repetitive modules at a vaster scale, you think about how Lambda introduced layers, for example. Those layers are meant to reduce the amount of coding that you need to do because you build the layer and then multiple Lambda functions can use those layers. It will be the same, I reckon, at some point where, we look for those areas of repetition across multiple structures, whether it's hierarchical, whether it's microservice, whether it's flat architectural things in a large enterprise, and again, rather than hiring a large amount of people to go and do it with a fine tooth comb, as they say, and then report everything back and try and consolidate that and come up with the bits that we're going to automate, AI can be used to do that. It can be used to assess that data and look to suggest vast improvements where we're seeing something that's common. So it'll be interesting to see how quickly this happens. And I know certainly from your point of view, Babak, that using it to augment testing and remove some of the need to be so meticulous around all of the different tests and all of the different things that you could do in such a repetitive way across so many changes, it's going to create boredom. Boredom creates apathy. Apathy creates error.
Exactly. So I mean, the reason that automation exists was that to actually stop us from, so that we have no need to do these repetitive tasks over and over and over again. AI, the way at least, this broad term is being coined, it's an automation of its own. It's just automating the human element in some sense, at least the intuitive element, the decision making, if I may say so. That's what's being automated in this case. And there are many places, and that goes back to information overload, that we have to make a lot of different decisions about a lot of different pieces. If you are setting an entire pipeline, or if you have a very complex project, there will be so many different pieces in there to consider that quite often they get overlooked or there's something missing. Imagine if you had some kind of an assistant, that can guide you, say, hey, this is your end goal, or this is something that you've missed, or there's a better way to achieving what you built already. So if it can't find a more optimal way of, to improve your work, if it can look over, see that, hey, there's been a change, I can adapt it so that your overall behavior remains the same. So we're talking about systematic remediation and automatic upgrades depending on new technologies being available, things like that. If you have this understanding of the system and what the goal is. Yeah.
No, that's great. Thank you both very much for that. I'm conscious of time just now, but we've had a response to, it's from a question from Chris about what you were talking about, Babak, about the AI and testing. And Chris has asked, would machine learning driven tests be flaky because the system needs time to learn about the application? Would they be flaky at first?
So, well, everything is flaky when you start with it, but the end goal is that, pretty much in quality assurance, is that you want to get some kind of an assurance to a reasonable extent. It's not going to be perfect, but if it can outperform what we have right now, that's a massive improvement. If we can outperform the quality of what we have right now and do it faster, that's an even bigger win in general. So, and when we're talking about auto generation, we're not envisioning something that will replace testers altogether. We're envisioning a tool that will assist a tester to create these testing scenarios or perform his tasks in a different manner. So it would help you, assist you in making your decisions, and perhaps just be it's similar to an assistant. Really, that's the goal.
No, that's great, and actually leads me on nicely to the last question that we'll probably have time for this afternoon, which is AI going to replace me in my role just now?
So this has been asked a lot. So opinions differ. Some people like to refer to science fiction about these fully intelligent and self-aware beings that are eventually going to replace us all. I would say AI is not going to replace us. Each of us is unique. We're replaceable. But what it's going to do, it's going to change the nature of our work. If it is replacing the need for you to perform this repetitive task over and over and over again, it's going to change what is happening. It's not going to necessarily replace the need for people who comprehend to do that. But being skilled in understanding the new technologies will become more important, as we can see historically throughout history. Throughout technology and how it has emerged, and how different types of positions have disappeared because of emerging technology, but new positions have appeared because of emerging technology. I mean, we're all here because computers are reality, and we have this amazing infrastructure of what's happening.
Yeah, it's similar with any new technology, isn't it? But yeah, Phil, I'll let you.
Well, I think I'd probably catch on to the part that the point that Babak was making. So the repetitiveness of certain work is probably a byproduct of the last 100 years of management systems. And it's the difference in cultures. So, with a good vision, mission, and everything, that you can focus on what you're actually meant to be doing, and it's much easier to trust the person to go and innovate and create valuable items that are in line with a company's vision, or an organization, or a charity, or whoever it is that you work with, rather than a person responsible for management breaking down all of that work into the doable parts and then handing that to someone and giving that as their job, right? That is it. You don't do anything else. You put thing A over on place B, and that's it. That's all you do. And yeah, a lot of those roles are going to be replaced. A lot of that type of work will be replaced. However, that doesn't mean people will be replaced, okay? Because the people need to then be given work that is above that. They are then in charge of the control of those repetitive tasks that have to be done. And actually, what that requires from then is the intuition to think, well, in doing this repetitive task like this the same way again and again that we're now allowing this software to do, this machine to do, we're missing a vital element of quality that's not there. How about we change this process to do this thing, to do this other thing that brings value to customers? And so, it's not without the thought of humans and with the change of models, for example, that you get a better quality fraud detection system. It's not without the people fielding the calls that are coming into contact centers that you'll get better quality, but you can provide information into those people, things that they would have had to have done repetitively with much more ease using AI. And actually what that allows, and one of the I suppose it shouldn't be a surprise to many, but it does come as a surprise when you're working with it, is that having invented chatbots and AI augmentation and stuff like that, and doing it poorly, has just increased the number of calls. It hasn't reduced the number of calls. Having many things automated hasn't increased the quality of the services. Dealing with a problem incorrectly causes problems elsewhere. And so where AI is going to be a really strong case is finding those issues, finding the things that are not delivering quality. And the thing is that needs people. It needs people searching for those things. It needs people disseminating the summarization of information that AI and ML provide, and then feeding that back into how we design new systems. So sure, there will definitely be people along that journey that may not transition as well into the new type of role that they'll be doing, which requires a lot more innovation and thinking. But generally, this addition to AI and ML is not meant as a replacement. And back to what Babak said, there's quite a lot of sci-fi around that, where the machines can do everything. And actually, I think it was yesterday I saw an article that had been completely written by a machine, but for that to have been done, it still required human input. It still required the model to be created. It still required the creativity. And now that model has a very specific function to write articles. The impact of that could be awful if the machines go wild and start writing articles that are made up from maybe not so much facts, but the parameters that people have tuned to get it to say a certain thing. But I think the motivation behind using it is never to replace people. It's to allow them to do more interesting work and become a more valuable proposition to the people that are impacted by that work.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of summarizing it, is that it's there to enhance and allow us to do more interesting and more useful things. Sorry, on you go quickly, Baba.
Sorry, I was going to say, this machine intelligence, it's a tool. It's a tool like any other that we've had. It will have the exact same impact that every other tool has had historically. So if it's going to replace a function, it's actually made for a specific function, as Phil was saying. And if there is no need to take 20 steps to do something that has been replaced by a single step, why not? It allows us to work in what we are more creative tasks and things that we don't necessarily want to replace. We're not making this to replace us. We're making this to make our lives easier.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for this afternoon. I could have literally sat and spoken for hours about this, but unfortunately, got to call it a session now. I noticed we've got a question in the comments that we didn't get around to answering. So what we'll do is I'll put this to the guys after when this session ends, and we can get back. We'll leave a comment on the YouTube recording, with an answer and with what the question is. So you come back to YouTube in a couple of hours or so, and you'll see an answer to that. But yeah, thanks very much to everyone for attending the session today, and obviously thanks to Babak and Phil for your time and your expertise. So if you do want to keep up to date with the latest ECS news and events, then you can follow us on LinkedIn or subscribe to the YouTube channel that you're watching just now. And we've got a couple of related events coming up over the next week or so. So at the IDC DevOps conference on the 24th of September, Sandeep and Charlie from ECS are giving a keynote on where they'll be sharing ECS's new offering, which is the Digital Engine Room. So if you're looking to find out more about that, then keep an eye on that conference. And we've also got a DevOps Playground meetup page. And the DevOps Playground is an opportunity for you to get hands-on with the latest tools and technologies. We provide the infrastructure, and you get to follow the session live using your own laptop. So our next event is going to be on Thursday, 24th of September at 6 p.m. And Cameron Harper is going to be guiding us through a session on using GitOps with Python, Terraform, and Lambda and AWS. So yeah, that's Thursday, 24th of September at 6 p.m. So we'll hopefully see you at one of the upcoming sessions. So thanks again for your time this afternoon, and I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll see you soon.
Thanks for organizing, Sally.
Thank you, everyone. Cheers.
Okay, thank you.